Well, as we plough through another week of long hours of scheduled power cuts, Public Enterprises Minister Pravin Gordhan, who represents government as the main shareholder at Eskom, has made a move. He announced this afternoon that he has reviewed the board of Eskom and made some decisions. The Eskom Board has been in limbo for quite some time. Since 2018, 7 board members have resigned. None has been replaced so far. It leaves only 6 non-executive board members currently. Their term has expired. It has been extended subject to a review. So there's lots happening in that board. The chair of the board is Professor Makgoba. So I'm joined now by Professor Lwazi Ngubevana, Director of the African Energy Leadership Centre at the Wits Business School. Prof, thank you so much for joining us. Do you believe that this is important, that the board is sorted out, the problems and the fact that there's been sort of operating at half power, pretty much like Eskom itself for quite some time? Is that a real problem in your view?
Good evening, Sally. Look, I think it is important that we have a board that is properly constituted because in addition to ensuring good corporate governance, the role of the board is to make sure that it develops strategy and plans for the company going forward, but also puts into place plans and also measures to actually measure the progress towards what where they're trying to go as a company. So it is important that the board is properly constituted.
Talk to me about why it's taken so long for, first of all, the Public Enterprises Minister to say, right, I've reviewed, I've now got a plan. That, of course, still has to go through government for approval. But why has it taken so long? Is it because there's a shortage of the right kind of people to sit on such a challenging board?
No, I refuse to believe that. South Africa has got lots of people, executives, well-proven non-executive directors from across private sector, but also in the public space. So I refuse to believe that it's because there isn't enough people or the right caliber of candidates to sit on the board. As to why it's taken so long, I think only the minister really would be in a position to explain why it's taken so long.
So Professor Makgoba, he is the chair of the board. He doesn't have any specific engineering experience as far as I'm aware. He has been criticised for that. Is it possible to chair a board that oversees the work of a massive power utility and not have a strong knowledge of engineering or the economy, for example?
Well, I don't think the chair of the board necessarily needs to be an engineer. I think that within the board of Eskom, we definitely need engineering skills, but it needs to be very specific engineering skills, not just any engineer. You need power engineers, you need energy engineers on the board. But with that said, a board has to be constituted, of various skills. You need legal expertise, you need corporate governance expertise on the board. You've got to make sure that you've got economics and finance and audit kind of backgrounds making up the board. So the chair themselves, I don't think is really all that important that they're an engineer, but you need somebody with experience in running complex organizations.
Talk to me about the relationship between the board and the top management at Eskom, the so-called C-suite, the CEOs, the COOs. If you have a poorly functioning or a half-functioning board, does it always impact on the work of the managers who have to run the place?
Yeah, it will. It absolutely will. Same as the relationship between them. If you've got a breakdown in the relationship between the board and your executives, then your organization becomes dysfunctional. So that relationship is absolutely critical. But most importantly with that, I think, is communication between the two spheres of governance.
Because what we're hearing is that the board, as it currently stands, is generally happy with the work of Andre de Ruyter and his team. If Pravin Gordhan is heading for a reshuffle, and obviously we don't quite know what his plans are, but let's say he's having a big clear out, would it necessarily follow that he may then move on to a management clear-out? Or is it quite feasible that he might reshuffle or change the board but leave the management team intact?
Well, I don't see how, that's going to be easy to leave the management team intact. I think that if you are going to make large-scale changes to the board, it almost follows that there will be changes to the executive at some level.
I'd love to hear your view. Professor Mark Swilling of the National Planning Commission, I asked him, in the light of so many calls for the board to be fired, for the CEO and the C-suite to be fired, what he thinks. And he said it's a kind of cosmetic change that wouldn't actually help. It might cause more problems because then you'd need a whole new team to come in. It would probably take a year for them to find their feet. Do you agree with him?
Well, I guess it comes down to his diagnosis of what the problem is. If he feels that he's happy with the work that the board is doing and is happy with, the work that the executives are doing, the board is happy with the executives, then I guess he's right that, making wholesale changes will most likely slow things down because the new members need to come in. But then again, there's a large number of experienced board members that can come in and hit the ground running. And within Eskom, there's a large number of executives that can take up the mantle and keep the organization going, and in fact, even improve it.
You obviously, this is an area of expertise for you. This is something you look at quite intensely. Do you believe that the board and management at Eskom needs either to be fired or seriously shaken up?
Well, the only comment I can make in that regard is that South Africa, many years later, we're still suffering from an energy shortage, electricity shortage in particular. Now we have to ask ourselves, is this a sign of a successful executive and board, or do we see that as a failure? So I think, the agreement between the board and the shareholder representative, who is the minister, is what's important here. Because depending on what they've signed in their compact, I think then maybe we need to scrutinize that. Because if he's happy, they are happy with the executives, then there's nothing that that can be done. But I know that as a South African citizen, I'm not happy. As I speak to you, I was supposed to have been load shed. I think somebody forgot, fortunately. But no, really, that is the reality.
No, it is. We always feel sort of quite victorious when we miss the bullet of load shedding, don't we? Yeah. Look, I mean, I suppose the obvious rejoinder, and I'd love a response because I'm really fascinated in how you're engaging with this, is that this problem was years in the making. Thabo Mbeki has acknowledged that he made the wrong decision when Eskom came to him in 2008 and said we have to start building quickly. We know what state capture did at Eskom, but also how it meddled in boards. There's so much fragility and so much recovery. How do you factor that in when weighing up the performance of what the current team is trying to do?
Well, in fact, Sally, Eskom raised the alarm in the late 90s already. So it wasn't just in 2008 that they went to the president and said, look, we are going to run into a crisis. And unfortunately, there was, inertia from, I would say, the political establishment to act on this advice from Eskom. Now, my view, as I said, there are competent people within Eskom that can turn the ship around. It's going to take time. It's going to be painful, but it can be done.
And do you believe a better team could do better? Do you believe a different team, rather, could do better?
I don't think we necessarily need a different team. I think what needs to be looked at is what the assessment the minister comes out with, what that assessment says. So you may find within a board that, there's perhaps some board members who haven't fully, delivered according to the agreement that they've got with the minister. And of course, those members perhaps need to make way. And very importantly, of course, we need to look at, what was missing from the board to make them more effective and change the situation that we're in. And once you identify those, then you bring in the right people. So it might not necessarily be a case of let's get rid of everybody. I don't think that's necessarily going to work. But also a bit of continuity is always important.
Yeah, you make
because then when
points.
looking the best thing, institutional memory.
Yeah, you make some really good points. And as you explained earlier, that it's about getting a good mixture of different skills on that board. So while your chair might not know engineering, but if board member X knows exactly the details, then they're not going to have the wool pulled over their eyes. They're not going to make the wrong decisions. Thank you so much for chatting to us this evening. That was Professor Lwazi Ngubevana, Director of the African Energy Leadership Centre at the Wits Business School, talking to us about the importance of a properly constituted full board with a lot of variety of skills to make good decisions at Eskom.